All right, what's up, my friends? I hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world listening to this around the world. I appreciate you guys being here, and this is episode 683 of Extreme Health Radio. So if you want to grab the show notes, if you want to link over to Adam Bergstrom's websites or Morley Robbins' websites, or check out the sponsors or anything we talk about on today's show, just go to extremehealthradio.com/683. And we'll put everything over there for you. And you probably noticed a little difference in our scheduling. We had to record this show not live, which we normally do every Friday morning at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook and YouTube. But we had to pre-record this via Zoom because we had some tech issues. So I apologize for that. But I hope you guys enjoy the show. So today we talk about iron, polyunsaturated fatty acids, we talked about fish oil, we talked about retinol, we talked about ceruloplasmin, we talked about iron and oxidation and rust in the body and how to effectively mitigate those things in the body. And if you can do that, you can prevent a lot of diseases. So what most people don't realize is that a lot of disease, or some people think most disease, is caused by oxidation, aka rust. And how do we rust on the inside? Primarily through the body's interactions with iron and oxygen. And so if we don't have a way to deal with that, then we rust or create oxidation on the inside. So how do we deal with that is what we talk about on today's show. And we talk about fish oil, we talk about retinol, we talk about ceruloplasmin, we talk about copper and oxygen and iron and all those good things. So I hope you enjoy the show. And so because we're not going to run any commercials on today's show, I just want to tell you really quickly about a couple products. And I hope you support us and check out these products for yourself, because speaking of rust, the AquaCure is a machine that helps create Brown's gas. And there's over 1,100 studies on molecular hydrogen and what this can do for the body. And it's the world's smallest antioxidant. That means it's like 400 times smaller than vitamin C and 700 times smaller than CoQ10, which means you can breathe the gas and bubble the water. And what this does is it passes the blood-brain barrier. And according to my research, it actually goes into the DNA and repairs your DNA. So this is really awesome product for longevity and minimizing the oxidation and rust. That's an AquaCure machine available on biochargeme.com. And the other product I want to tell you about really quickly before we start the show, and this is a product I think all of us should have, is this Relax Far Infrared Sauna. This is an incredible device that uses healing light frequencies, far infrared light, to be able to go inside your cells and oscillate your fat cells, which is where you store lots of environmental toxins and poisons. And what this does is it uses the light frequency to oscillate those cells and basically slough off all of those toxins that are stored in your fat cells. And it allows that to be taken away, exported out of the body through your skin, so it bypasses your liver and your kidneys, which is amazing. So this is a great thing to do for detox 3-4 times a week, 30 minutes a time, 20 minutes a time, whatever you have time for. That's the Relax Far Infrared Sauna available. Both those are available at biochargeme.com. So I'll put links to those as well at extremehealthradio.com/683, which is today's show. So I really hope you enjoy the show. And if you like it, please share it with your friends. We don't have any, a team of marketing experts and, people to share this stuff. So we rely on you. So I hope you enjoy the show with Morley and Adam on lipofuscinosis and yellow fat disease, iron, and oxygen, and how all of this stuff ties together. So enjoy the show, and I'll check you guys out at the end. Thank God. Give her a big hug for me, please.
I will give her a big hug. She gives everybody a hug back.
That's awesome.
There we go. That's great.
All right, so we'll just start off, and we're going to have a really cool conversation with Mr. Morley Robbins and Adam Bergstrom, and this is episode 683 of Extreme Health Radio. So what I'll do is I'll put a link to everything we talk about, to Morley's websites, to Adam's websites, and all of that at extremehealthradio.com/683. And today we're going to talk about lipofuscinosis. We're going to talk about iron and how omega-3 fats fit into all of that. So if you're unfamiliar with Adam Bergstrom, he's been teaching workshops and seminars around the world, around the USA since 1977. He's written over 12 books on lipofuscin itself, 50 years of experience in health and nutrition, and has been working with people from all around the world. And Morley Robbins is the creator of the Root Cause Protocol, also known as the Magnesium Man, is one of the foremost experts on magnesium's role in the body and the delicate dance between that magnesium plays with iron, copper, and calcium. So this is going to be a really cool discussion. And I figured we're going to talk about lipofuscinosis, lipofuscin, omega-3 fats, and how they interplay with iron. And Adam has written 12 books on this subject. And so I figured let's start with him, and we'll kind of just go down the rabbit trail. Yeah. And we'll talk with Adam about what lipofuscin is for those that don't know. And then we'll just kind of begin that trail.
All righty then. You inspired me to write number 11 and 12 because I overheard you and Matt Blackburn talking about me writing 11 books, and I figured, well, might as well. And then I ended up doing 12 because for someone who never heard about it till about 5 years ago, when Ray Peat mentioned it, actually I heard him mention it a couple of years before, but never looked into it. Then when I looked into it, every animal on Earth gets lipofuscinosis. Bears, salmon, mink, humans, you can't name it. There's no piece of protoplasm or insect that doesn't get lipofuscinosis. Incorrectly, it is mentioned as a chronological measurement of aging, exact in animals. But what they don't tell you, it's really a biological measurement of aging. So, and age-related diseases too, which about 150,000 people a day die of age-related diseases or just plain old aging itself. So anyway, I was amazed to find out that it had to do with 3 of Aubrey de Grey's 7 deadly sins of aging, entire 3 of them. Now, 2 directly, and 1 is glycation, but it turns out that glycation, the oils are in charge. In fact, there is one oil, methyloxyl, that's as much as 10,000 times more toxic than sugar. And Aubrey de Grey knew that, sure, we get too much sugar, it can be toxic. But if you take something necessary for life and start monkeying with it with their particular protocols, you'll kill the person. So you want to go to the oils and the proteins that are in it, which are the major bulk of it, are probably just residues from mitochondria that's been destroyed by it. And lipofuscinosis, for instance, from oils has been discovered back before the Civil War. I've got many cases of liver disease being destroyed, and shrunken heart disease, brown bowel disease. Crohn's disease is actually brown bowel disease, which is yellow fat disease.
So Adam, just to make sure that I understand, lipofuscin isn't necessarily just the oxidation of omega-3. It's also iron and estrogens and aluminum and heavy metals. It's kind of a conglomerate of many different things. Is that right?
A conglomerate of heavy metals including iron, copper, zinc, mercury, lead in small amounts. Okay. Those heavy metals never get above 2%, but just because something is minor doesn't mean it doesn't have big effects. There are certain things like look at how little cobalt we need in our diet and B12, and yet look how essential it is to the body. Okay, so anyway, lipofuscinosis has been around a long time. It is not passive in the cell. It actually is aggressive. Instead of like a room being crowded with it, which used to be the way of doing it, it's like having a room full of rodents that you have to be careful they don't bite you in the ankle.
Yeah.
So lipofuscinosis is, again, people, when they look up omega-3 fatty acids, how wonderful they are, they always, you're going to find thousands and thousands and thousands of studies saying that, but no one ever puts in yellow fat disease and comes in the back door. Because no matter how you cut it, no matter what it does, if it does do some wonderful things or not, it gives you yellow fat disease. And the more you get, the faster you age.
So Morley, let me understand if I understand your sort of take on this, at least a little bit, is that when you introduce something like omega-3 fatty acids into a body full of iron, that's different than introducing it into a body that has proper levels of iron. Is that the direction you're kind of going?
Yeah, I think we have to back up. And first of all, Adam, it's an honor to have an opportunity to share the stage with you. So thank you for your perseverance to make this communication work. This is what the listeners don't know is the hours of effort that's gone into this. So this is like, again, very, very excited to have this conversation. And I was sharing with Justin that one of my mentors had told me about a year ago. He said, Morley, you've really mastered the art of the simple question. And I was very, very touched when he said that, because what really drove me into this work was, why is everyone getting so sick? I'd been a hospital executive for 32 years and couldn't figure out, why are the beds so full? And there's been a series of simple questions. And so I was talking with him yesterday, and I'd made a reference to that compliment he had made. He said, well, actually, Morley, there's something I need to tell you now. And I said, what's that? He said, the simple question is the mentor. I went, oh, okay, now I get it. So I think it's important for the listeners to understand that what Adam is sharing is very, very important. It's just that we live in a world that we all know that when an apple falls from a tree, it's going to come and hit the earth. We know that. There isn't even any question about it. We're not worried about the apple flying up into space or whatever. We know that there's this gravitational pull. And unfortunately, most doctors are like rocket scientists that don't understand what gravity is. And worse yet, they don't understand what levitation is, or levity. So gravity is the force down, levity is the force up. Well, what's the force down? It's all about iron. There's the number one element on planet Earth is iron. 36% of the Earth is iron. And we talk about aging like, well, aging is some mysterious disease. No, it's not. It's an iron accumulation condition. So when Adam says 150,000 people die of aging, what he's really talking about is 150,000 people dying from iron overload. And then what's completely lost, and getting back to your question, Justin, is iron is the master pro-oxidant, number one element on the planet, master pro-oxidant. No one disputes that. But we also live on a planet that has oxygen. And 21% of the air we breathe has oxygen. And that oxygen is a poison. Second most reactive element on the planet after fluoride. And we know that when iron and oxygen come together, what do? They create rust. And I think one form of that rust is what we're talking about today, is lipofuscin. But I think it's important that, and again, I will defer to the master here about lipofuscin, because I haven't written 12 books. I've just finished my first and it hasn't been published yet, but I know how hard that was. I can't imagine doing it 11 more times. So I have such great admiration for what you've done. But I've read probably 25 or 30 articles. So, okay, so now I'm an expert, right? But the thing is, the only metal that I see routinely and consistently discussed in the creation of lipofuscin is there's only one heavy metal we need to worry about, and that's iron. You don't have to worry about mercury. You don't have to worry about zinc. You don't have to worry about copper in the way that they like us to worry about it. Iron is the number one villain here. And I think what's also missing is of understanding about the enzymes that are involved in the lysosomes, in the proteasomes, in the phagosomes, that are involved in breaking down this garbage that accumulates in our cells. And I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that. But the one that really captured my interest recently is called soluble epoxide hydrolase. And it's a scary enzyme. In fact, what they're now doing is they're silencing that enzyme so it doesn't cause Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Well, I'm sure that Adam would agree with me that the big challenge of neurodegeneration is iron. And so I'm convinced that there's a connection between iron and soluble epoxide hydrolase, and I'm hoping that Adam can share that with us. But I think that what was fun in our earlier encounter yesterday, trying to get this connection, where it was Adam was very quick to say, Morley, we both are anti-iron. And I think that's really important for everyone to understand that we share a common enemy. I think we come at it from different perspectives, different fields of study. And I guess what I'm really curious about, particularly as it relates to Adam's expertise, is where does copper and where does bioavailable copper fit into your paradigm? Because I understand your caution and your reticence about the fish oils, and I've never promoted omega-3s or omega-6s. That's never been a part of my paradigm. But I think that where we might have a hiccup is over retinol, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I'd really love to get a sense of your perspective of where copper and more importantly, bioavailable copper, as it relates to its protein expression, where does that fit into your overall construct of trying to stay healthy and stay young, particularly as we're going through this aging process?
Mm.
It's an important element. Ironically, pardon the pun, copper is now in the news because if you want copper, come to Montecito. They're actually, it's shocking people, and with potential electrification, because having electricity near copper pipes uses electrolysis to get the copper out of the pipes, and is actually poisoning people. Yeah. But copper is definitely not the threat that iron is. Iron is balanced by calcium, and it's balanced by manganese too, interesting enough, while zinc and copper balance each other. I'm a big fan of the periodic table of the elements.
Yep.
And if you notice the home of iron, strangely, to give a little plug to iron here, even though I'm going to diss it continuously, iron is the most important regulator in the human body. Iron 56 is the only non-radioactive element in the entire periodic table. No other one exists.
What is it? Iron 56, you said?
Iron 56 is an isotope of iron. If the universe would wind down, if there was such a thing as entropy, which there isn't, the whole universe would wind down over trillions and trillions of years and end up nothing but empty space and iron 56. Physicists know this. Why? Iron 56 is the dividing point between fission, things breaking down, and fusion, things building up. And right in the middle is 56. Everything else is slightly radioactive. Some things like potassium will set off a Geiger counter in bananas if you put Geiger counter up.
So Adam, going back to what Morley was saying, how does the copper play in retinoic acid and that play a role in this?
Well, a lot of elements balance iron out, and the most important ones are in the fourth period. You will notice that magnesium is on the third period of the periodic table of the elements. It is more involved with the what's called the Mesozoic level, or the level we acquired from the sea. But you'll find everything in the blood cell, not in the blood serum, not in the blood plasma. You'll find it right along next to iron. You'll find iron. First there's manganese, then there's iron, then there's cobalt, nickel, zinc, and copper and zinc, all in order, because copper is the center of the blood of lobsters. Cooper globin, they call it. And vanadium, on that same line, the fourth level, is the center of the cell of, I'm not sure what you call it, vanadium globium. The sea squirt actually uses it. So you can only use a cell control unit out of the fourth period of the elements. Anything below that is the organelle of the cell. Anything above that is going to be the combined nature of the tissue level. In fact, the Mesozoic sea level is also called the tissular level. Now, plants have potassium and potassium at the same spot because plants went into the sea and came back as animals, not like they tell us the other way around, that we didn't start in the sea and crawl out. We started on land as plants, went down into the sea, got sodium for flexibility, and after the flexibility came back on land. That's why plants have a very different cellular structure than human beings do. But copper is very important for life. You know, you definitely need it, and iron is too. But the problem with iron is it was hard to get. We don't make bones out of iron. We don't make our tissue out of iron. We only use it for transportation. And so it was hard to get at one time. And so then you needed it. So you didn't get anemia. But now iron is so overly rich even on our food before you even factor in supplementation. And supplementation, again, a little is good, but a lot is death. And so many people are dying, admittedly, definitely from iron overload. It's the one of the commonest diseases in the world, especially the well-fed world, the ones the people who can go to the supermarkets. Sometimes in primitive places, though, the iron will be in the water and places like that, and they can certainly get iron load overly. So to me, people talk about heavy metals, mercury, lead, cadmium, all of that. They overlook iron. That's supposed to be healthy, and actually it's the worst of the whole bunch. It's the leader of the desperados.
And one of those simple questions that drove my research, which I think you'll get a kick out of, was I really wanted to know if iron is number one, if it's the number one element on the planet, and anemia is the number one nutrient deficiency on planet Earth. And I think we would probably agree that humans are the most evolved species on the planet. I did not know that we started out as plants, went into the sea and came back out. Thank you for that. That's a beautiful description of it. Makes perfect sense. And if humans are in fact the smartest species on the planet, that would mean that the most evolved species can't metabolize the number one element on the planet. And that didn't make sense to me. And so you're talking with a guy I really gulped the first time I said this. I said, there is no anemia of iron deficiency on planet Earth. It doesn't exist. And Adam, I was expecting this tsunami of, how dare you say that? And guess what the response has been? Silence. Not one person has challenged me, whether it's from the allopathic or the alternative world. But what's important for the listeners to understand, in light of what you've shared, is a little known secret is that copper and iron are the only metals on the planet that can work with oxygen. Iron carries it like a waiter, but it's copper that's the chef that's slicing and dicing it. And you got to be able to work with oxygen. It's a really pesky element, as you well know. And one of my favorite cartoons is a fish talking to the first lungfish. Mm-hmm. And the fish says to the lungfish, oh, you better be careful. That cholesterol is going to kill you. And what most people don't realize is that when oxygen did in fact appear on the planet many billions of years ago, three things popped up right away. Or I'm sure they evolved. I don't want to make it sound like someone switched the light switch. But they evolved, and they were multi-copper oxidases. Those are real important because those are the enzymes that turn oxygen into water. Mm-hmm. Melatonin goes way back. And this third thing called cholesterol. Cholesterol's been on the planet ever since oxygen's been on the planet. And yet we're supposed to believe it's causing our heart disease. Well, when you get into the weeds of atherosclerosis and get into the weeds of all of the neurodegeneration, it's all the mismanagement of iron. And it turns out, at least in the research that I'm reading, there's an inescapable role between copper and iron. And copper is the only element on planet Earth that can regulate both iron and oxygen. And it's unique in its ability to do that.
So Morley, my question then is, how do we know it's possible to be able to lower the iron levels in the body to the extent that taking omega-3 would be acceptable? Is that possible to know that? Because like you said, the fortification project started in 41, doubled in 69, and then so much iron being liberated from the soils and acid rain and stuff. How do we know it's possible to lower iron levels to be able to accept something like a PUFA?
Well, I think what's important is what I'm really excited by is that Adam and I are, I think, strikingly in agreement about the importance of the periodic table. We're striking an agreement about the importance of curbing iron. It's just it's the villain on the planet. I think we're in agreement about curbing omega-3s and omega-6s. One of my other mentors, Adam, was Frederick Kummerow. That's probably a name you know. He did a lot of research with lipids. He got his degree at University of Wisconsin back in the day, 1940, when Elveham was still leading the center there. But I think the real complication here around PUFAs, and again, I will defer to the master, but I really believe that iron is a clear catalytic agent in creating lipofuscin. I think that's without dispute. I think the other is because we don't have mastery of where copper really works in the body and where it doesn't work. What I was sharing with Justin before we got connected, Adam, is that I came across an article today as I was getting ready for this discussion, which absolutely blew my mind because it was talking about the copper loading enzyme ATP7A. It's called the Menkes enzyme. And if suddenly Joseph Prohaska, who's a world-renowned copper expert, were sitting next to me, he would tell us that ATP7A is important for nine copper enzymes. Well, the study that I came across from 2019 this morning was that actually it's related to 541 enzymes. And so they just
Wow.
blew up the whole paradigm of the reach of copper. And I think that's why I made reference to this enzyme soluble epoxide hydrolase. Just the name scares me, Adam, to be honest. But it's that I have a feeling that is an iron catalyzed enzyme. And in the absence of copper or understanding what copper does, well, then it's really scary. And to answer Justin's question, my goal is not to try to get omega-3s and 6s in the body. My goal is my overarching paradigm is to make more energy, increase the ATP production of the cells and the tissue, because energy hides a lot of problems, doesn't it? And so the mitochondria run on the energy of copper. That's, they'll tell you, with great deference, they'll say, well, yeah, okay, complex 4 runs on copper. Well, it turns out that complex 1, I would argue 3, absolutely 4 and 5 all run on copper. The matrix pool in the center, it's filled with copper. The signaling molecule, the whole function of CoQ10, that's got copper written all over it. And again, it's been very carefully described in the literature to make it seem like copper is just this little tiny thing inside complex 4, when in fact, I think the reason why we're here, the reason why we're having this conversation, the reason why we're able to talk with each other on this very sophisticated platform that required some degree of intelligence and persistence is because of the energy of copper. And I think that whole messaging has been so dispersed in the mainstream messaging. And one of my real frustrations with the fields of nutrition and medicine is that they're more based on fear than they are on physiology. Oh, you've got to avoid that. That's a really dangerous thing, and you don't put that in your body. When it's like, well, wait, let's talk about why is cholesterol so bad again? What is it doing? Oh, you mean it goes back to the beginning of oxygen? So again, these rule-based, fear-based protests, when people didn't stop and say, well, Dr. Keyes, why are you so afraid of fat? And why are you so afraid of cholesterol? What most people don't know is he actually has 2 PhDs. His first PhD was in oceanography from a little school in England called Cambridge.
Never
And
heard
I'm
of
going to, yeah, and I'm going to go out on a limb, Adam, and I'm going to bet that he knew that there were minerals in the ocean. Don't you think he knew that? And then for him to tell us that fat is the devil, when in fact, what's the whole problem with atherosclerosis? It's the rusting of low-density lipoproteins. And what's the very first event in atherosclerosis? This took me years to figure this out. It's the loss of energy production of the endothelial cells. If the ATP goes down, then we can't recycle cholesterol. And when we can't recycle cholesterol, then it starts to create foam cells. And then the iron starts to build up in those endothelial cells. And guess what they do? That's your wheelhouse. We're creating chaos inside the cell with the fats, not the sugar. I love the fact that you really put the spotlight on the fats. And what's essential in order to absorb copper? You got to have fat in your diet. And what's absolutely essential in order to break down fat, beta oxidation enzymes don't work without copper. And so again, to me, sometimes, and Justin's had the pleasure and probably frustration of, sometimes I feel like I'm this one-eyed copper whisperer in the valley of the blind, like, doesn't everyone else know this? So it's just, I think it's a great question about the role that iron plays, but I think we also need to kind of pull the curtain back and say, where's copper in all these problems that people are having with lipid issues? Because I think there's been this tremendous loss of copper in the food system, and we can theorize about what some of the reasons are, but I think we've been completely dumbed down with loss of copper, and I think to your point, we're being overexposed to iron, and I wouldn't even suggest that it's something that should be in supplement bottles, because it turns out that according to the leading iron biologists, and I've talked to a couple of them, Douglas Kell and Robert Crichton, they both said, you know that you only need 1 milligram of iron a day, right? I said, yeah, I know that. And for the listeners, a good rule of thumb to figure out how much iron you do have in your body is take your age and multiply it times 365. So when you do mine, 68 times 365 is a big number. It's a lot of that's 5 digits. And the 3 of us as guys should only have 5,000 milligrams of iron in our body. And what I can say with absolute certainty is that, Adam, you and I have more iron in our body than Justin. And Justin, you have more iron in your body than Will and Ben. Mm-hmm. And the aging process is not complicated. It's accumulation of iron, and it's the loss of copper. That's it. And when those 2 events take place, and they crisscross about the age of 40, but when those 2 events take place, the level of oxidative stress rises, and I'll bet that oxidative stress is what's creating chaos with the PUFAs. Is that a fair statement, Adam?
It definitely makes a difference. In fact, iron becomes less toxic at its higher up in the mountains than it does in the ocean. Because the truth is, and they don't want you to know this, that if you're at 33 degrees underwater as a scuba diver, yep, or you go into double the atmospheric pressure in a hyperbaric chamber, you don't need any hemoglobin. The oxygen is delivered without hemoglobin. Wow. So there it is.
That's amazing. Oh my God, that's fabulous to learn. Yeah.
The hyperbaric people know that. And also on copper, copper top batteries. And copper is used as a heat sink in our melanin that protects us from getting cancer. Without the copper, there's other things in melanin, of course, but melanin has the copper in it. Copper tone tan. We even have the expression. And indeed, it is necessary for that copper tone tan.
Absolutely. So do you have any kind of insight about that enzyme, the epoxide hydrolase? Is it activated by iron? Do you know?
That's a total new one on me. I'm dry gulched by that. They always have these polysyllabic names that come out with new. I stick to small ones like 3-letter words like fat, 4-letter words like salt, 5-letter words like sugar. After that,
I love it.
I'll leave
Absolutely.
the chemists and the beagle boys.
Yeah. So what's fascinating to me is this idea of obviously the fish oil is, most of the alternative, health world is taking and consuming fish oil. So going back to sort of my question before, Morley, was that if you have a substance that there is a lot of debate about, and like I said, Adam's written 12 books about this, not just fish oil, but DHA and other forms of PUFAs. If there's a substance so the question really is whether or not these things are essential, right? And so if you have a questionable substance that could be mitigated by not taking it, wouldn't it make more sense to not take it if you can substitute it with other forms of fat? So if we don't know the interplay, like if we don't know the exact level of how much we can lower our iron, wouldn't it make sense to just be safe and not take a polyunsaturated fatty acid?
That's my strategy, because it depends on what you mean by essential. Essential means you can't make it. And for DHA and EPA, scientists will admit they're not essential. We can make them out of ALAs. And look at people like the desert people. Geronimo never had a fish in his life. And he lived to 80 and died from pneumonia when he was drunk, falling off his horse. Many of the Bedouins and the people who never ate fish, they did fine without it. So we automatically, if you eat no fat at all, you will make oleic acid out of our own body. And then that will construct cholesterol and everything. And by the way, cholesterol is so important. It is in the cell with the iron, according to my research. In other words, it's not supposed to be in the arteries. It's in the cell.
You're absolutely right.
So cholesterol is not supposed to be in the arteries at all.
Well, yes, it is, but not. It's not its home. Its home is inside the cell with iron. Everything on the fourth row, all of those elements, starting with potassium all the way to the end, they're all inside the cell. It's a really curious phenomenon that, just like you talk about gravity, the periodic table of the elements. Here, I got it.
Oh, nice. You have it on your shirt.
The elements actually precipitates. The heavy stuff goes down to the bottom of the pot, and the light stuff floats up to the top. That's why you find so many gases on the top of the periodic table of the elements. Well, cholesterol by weight is much better off in the cell mostly. It can go, obviously there's enzymes, there's all kinds of hormones that need some cholesterol to build it. In fact, we have no sex hormones without cholesterol. We wouldn't reproduce without it. In fact, the LDS is a more important form of a carrier of cholesterol than the HDS. They're both actually important and they do their jobs, but medicine is so clear to make something bad and something good instead of assigning them their proper roles and their proper level in the periodic table of the elements.
Yeah, very true. And I think that people have become very conditioned, very programmed. And I think your point, Justin, is a valid one that, again, when you get into the protocol that we've developed, the root cause protocol, and Adam, thank you so much for introducing me to Thomas Jefferson's statement, school teaches us all of the branches and none of the roots. I love that. That's priceless. That's a great quote. And I can't wait to listen to this conversation. I'm going to probably listen to it 3 or 4 times because I can't appreciate all the truth bombs and pearls that you're dropping are just priceless. So thank you. But I think the thing is, the stance of the RCP is basically nutrition and medicine have been telling us to go left. And that it looks like I'm pointing right, but it's actually left. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that Mother Nature wants us to go right. And I think you and I have a very similar philosophy about, I'm all about fat. And I've turned it into an acronym, from animal tissue. You know, don't give me these foo-foo oils and poofas. I think we're in complete agreement there. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people have been programmed to go left and to think that they need these omega-3s to be able to deal with their inflammation. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But I need my omega-3s, and I need my ascorbic acid, and I need my iron, and I need my calcium, and I need my vitamin D, and on and on it goes. And all that's over here, when in fact Mother Nature's over here saying, wait, whoa, you're missing magnesium, you've forgotten about copper, you're not understanding what saturated fat is as opposed to unsaturated fat, and the world is backwards, right? And now we see it politically. We're beginning to see, oh my God, everything's like upside down and backwards now. But I think what I've pieced together a couple of weeks ago, as it relates to inflammation, is in the world of copper research, they're very clear about the fact that when copper is low, inflammation is going to be high. Because when copper is low, when it's not bioavailable and it's not able to activate oxygen to make energy, or it can't deactivate oxygens to eliminate the static in the system, well, when copper is low, you are going to have a more inflammatory tissue. And what's another way to spell inflammation? Hydrogen peroxide. That's what inflammation is. It's just raging hydrogen peroxide. And it turns out that the use of aspirin and the use of omega-3s was selected to deal with inflammation because they didn't want to talk about copper. They didn't want people to realize that copper would solve this problem and 541 other problems. Let's get people to take this little baby aspirin, wink, wink. That's really what you need, wink, wink. Not telling them it's actually going to increase the chance for bleeding in their intestine. Or tell them that they need the omega-3s, wink, wink. Not telling them that well, actually you can make these things yourself. You can make the DHA and EPA. That's very important for people to realize. And so it doesn't trouble me. I don't think it troubles Adam, but I don't want to speak for you, but it doesn't trouble me at all to say we really shouldn't be taking these omega-3s and omega-6s in that isolated form. I think where the sticking point is I think that retinol is really important. The whole the many roles that the retinoids play, the retinoic acids and the nuclear receptors, the RARs and the RORs and RXRs. I don't know how to get those retinoids other than in select foods, which would be like beef liver and cod liver oil. And Adam, if you have a food source that you think delivers this, what I would call fat-based retinol, I'm all ears. I want to know about it. But I think that, to me, is, as I understand the copper-loading enzyme, this ATP7A and ATP7B, but as I understand those copper-loading enzymes, they require retinoic acid. In ATP7A, it's 13 cis. Go ahead.
Couldn't you get that retinoic acid from cheese and egg yolks and butter and ghee and things?
Possibly. I just don't know whether it's at a scale that it's physiologically viable. And it's a valid question. And maybe Adam has some insight about it, because I think where the real breakdown is, because copper has been pushed aside, it's not on the consciousness of people. They don't know what it takes to make it bioavailable. Right. They don't know about the copper enzymes. They don't know that these copper enzymes don't get created unless ATP7A and ATP7B are doing their job. And they don't know that there's a a very precise metabolic step that's required to load the copper and into this enzyme so that it actually activates these other enzymes. That, to me, that's where the real breakdown is there another way to get retinoic, 13-cis retinoic acid, which is a hormone? And what did Big Pharma do? They turned that really critical hormone into Accutane, which is a poison, because it accelerates the use of copper in the body in a very destructive way. And so they turned this essential retinoic acid, this really critical hormone in our body, and they turned it into a really dangerous drug that harms a lot of people on the planet. So any insight that you can share, Adam, about how we might get access to 13-cis, I would love to know it, because I think
that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah, I think that's where the tension is in our worldviews, I think.
You can get those things from egg and butter and places like that, and I do, but I eat whole foods.
Yeah.
A lot of times people are eating, like if you buy eggs from a normal corporate source now, you're going to get omega-3 fatty acids. You're not going to get the same thing.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's good. I don't tell people not to eat an egg, but with the omega-3 acids, they've changed dramatically. You know, they say it's essential for the brain, and they measure it in the brain. That's because people eat so many fish and other sources of it.
Right.
ALAs, like in flax oil and places like that, you get it too. But copper is definitely something we need for melanin, we need for energy. And I had something on my mind that was very important. Oh, yeah, muscles. You can't move muscles without copper. It works like a copper battery. And muscles are really the most important thing that would be the fourth period of the elements, and its sister elements, silver and gold, are for the circulation and for other parts of the body down. Gold goes into the DNA and places like that. But you need copper for muscle movement, and that you rarely hear anybody say how important it is.
That's true.
And it's a master control of muscle.
So Morley, the question, like the devil is in the details, right? So the question is, can we get this 13-cis retinoic acid from places other than cod liver oil? And the other question is, what amounts do we need, and and how high are those amounts in things like, if Adam is correct, in egg yolks and cheese and butter and ghee? That's sort of a little bit more nuanced than what you were saying, is like, okay, let's get into the details here, right?
No, I think what Adam is raising, which is a really scary concept. We know the expression, we are what we eat. Well, that's not true. We are what we eats, and can assimilate. And so when the chicken that's supposed to be eating bugs and grass, and why do we eat grass? Because there's vitamin C. Why do we want vitamin C? Because there's copper in the enzyme tyrosinase that's in the core of vitamin C. And so it turns out that, and I learned this a few weeks ago, there's a chemical that you can drop into milk that dictates, by how yellow the milk turns, how much copper is actually in the milk. And I was like, what? So then we think about the butter we buy. Well, if we buy commercial butter, it's kind of a pale yellow. If we get it from an Amish farmer, it's going to be a golden yellow, because the cows on the Amish farm are more likely to be eating grass than eating omega-3s. And I think what Adam's raising is a very important nuance to the food system, is people think they go to the store to get eggs, and they want them to be organic, and they see omega-3s and they get triggered, like, oh good, I won't have inflammation. Right. And Adam's like, no, don't go there. It's like, because the animal's not eating its natural diet. And when they open up that store-bought egg and it's a pasty yellow, they don't realize that means it doesn't have nutrient density. But when you open up a an Amish egg or maybe an egg that you've raised on your own property, and it's got that golden deep color, it's got copper, it's got bioflavonoids, it's got all sorts of nutrients that I wouldn't even begin to understand, but I know enough to know in the same way that Adam worships at simple words like fat and salt and sugar, I know that color is good. And it's real important to have color in your food, but I don't think the average person knows that. And I think the challenge is that what Justin is raising here is, so how much is enough?
Right.
Well, I'm of the opinion, and it'd be interesting to see what Adam's thought is here. I think most people are nutrient deserts, which is why I have this picture here, because I don't think they realize how depleted their diet is. And I think to Adam's point, they're probably eating their food all at the wrong time. That might be another conversation at another time. But the important thing is that I don't think people realize how they'd actually probably be better off eating the cardboard box than the food that's inside the box, because there's no nutrients in it. And what we're bumping up against is how much is enough. And at what point do we begin to reverse the aging process that I think we're all of? And I think back when our ancestors, and I think about it, the one that really impressed me the most was my grandfather, who was 72 years old the day that I was born. And I have this light bulb memory when I was 20 years old. Dada was 92 years old, and we were both picking weeds out of the steep hill that was on the face of his property.
Wow.
And I was getting exhausted, and Dada just kept pulling weeds because I think he had a lot of copper in his muscles. Adam, I never thought about it like that, but he was a tireless worker, and he was more your build than my build. So he wasn't a big muscular guy, but oh my gosh, he had energy as long as the day was long. And it was amazing to be around him. And he did funny things like he would salt his tomatoes that he grew and eat them. And he would salt his melons that he grew. And I was always looking at him like, gosh, that's really weird stuff. And he insisted on lots of butter in his foods. And he was very persnickety about his diet. Wow. But he was born in 1879, back when they really had real food. And you didn't have to worry about it in the same way that today, I look at people in the super. I saw someone trying to decide what butter to buy the other day. And I was tempted. I didn't do it, but I was tempted to go over and say, so what are the criteria you're using to decide one butter over the other? Is it cost? Is it color? Is it the location? I was really intrigued by because this woman was really agonizing over the decision. I'm like, do you even know what you're trying to do here? And I think most people are faced with that. I think they're absolutely lost when they get to the store, and they don't know what the filter is to decide, is this really nutrient valuable? I mean, I would love to have gosh, can you imagine the filter that Adam has that he uses to discern whether this is something I want to eat or I don't eat, just because of his command of the periodic table. But I think the struggle is, I'm not convinced that the average person's intake of butter and the average person's intake of cheese and the average person's intake of, say, heavy cream or whatever it might be. Most people are terrified of the word heavy or fat. But I just don't know that they're going to get enough of the retinol
and
the retinoic acid. And so then the obvious fallback is go to the foods that our ancestors used to eat, which was beef liver or organ meats, but beef liver particularly, and cod liver oil, which is certainly legendary. What is interesting, I saw in an article day before yesterday, it was the mouse model to create iron toxicity. It was fascinating. Feed the mice choline deficient food and supplement with iron. Well, that's the American diet. There's no choline. People are afraid of eggs. Oh, I'm going to get a heart attack. Most people are appalled. I've talked to over 6,000 people in 10 years, and I have a list of 13 people who got excited they could eat beef liver. Everybody else wanted to vomit. So people choline is not in their diet. And what are they eating? Iron fortified food. They've been eating iron fortified. You know what I was raised on? I used to eat sugar frosted flakes and Pop-Tarts and with an OJ chaser.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just happy to be here and to be able to have this conversation when I think about how I got started.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Justin, I don't know the answer to your question. It'd be interesting to see what Adam has to say about it in terms of what is a viable source of enough retinol to be able to drive this critical pathway.
Because there has to be answers in nature. There can't just be one answer. There has to be multiple, Yeah. What do you think, Adam?
Well, one thing I find most supplements now are made, they're very toxic. They're made through genetic modification. However, retinoic acid, I investigated it. It seems to be innocent of those things. So if you want a little insurance contract, do it. Because now the average diet, what they call butter, might be margarine. They go in a restaurant for certain. I haven't been in a restaurant in 3 years now, despite way before COVID. So we don't do that anymore. I did my share of it back in the day. So it's there.
So my question, going back to what you were talking about, Morley, is this: it seems like our topic of conversation is sort of hinging on this one aspect of, can we get retinoic acid into not just ceruloplasmin, but what you're saying is like 500 other enzymes, but mainly ceruloplasmin, so that copper can be properly bound in this enzyme, and then that copper can be utilized to sort of fend off all of the oxidation coming from the oxidation of iron and oxygen. So is copper, or is retinoic acid, the only thing that can do that? That's my question. It seems like, is that the only thing you found?
It's the only thing I've found.
Really? Other things. Nature always has a backup plan.
I totally agree. Yeah.
But nowadays, the diet has actually screwed up our metabolism dramatically. We don't have people. There were lots of people like Bernard McFadden. Remember him from the good old days? This guy was a multimillionaire. He had magazines galore, an entire empire of magazines. He walked to work barefoot in New York City for 25 miles one way, dictated his books while he stood on his head, ate sand, walked back 25 miles home, was parachuting when he was 82 and more. And look, we don't have people like Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and people. I look back at the old strongmen like William Bankier. He could lift an elephant. He could lift an elephant from, they put a big stand up and he stood above it and did a squat and squatted an elephant with a man on the elephant. What strong man can do that today? You know, strongmen back then were remarkable, of the Jack LaLanne age and Gypsy Boots and people like that. Now, because after the Second World War in 1946, we have super chemicalized ourselves. And now due to computers, we're making out so many new ones that they don't tell people. They want us to believe that salt, sugar, fat, that's the problem. And actually, it's all of these chemicals. Anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems to me like I've heard people talk about how there is retinoic acid in these animal fats. True vitamin A, which is what Morley is saying, is allowing that copper to be loaded into ceruloplasmin. So, Morley, is your contention that is true, but it doesn't give us enough of that?
Well, I think it's what we can say very confidently. What's the macro dynamic of food processing? Well, let's add iron filings. That's not a good thing to do. Let's add sugar. Not a good thing to do. When you look at the nutrient table, there's never any mention of magnesium or copper, which means it's not in the food. Oh, let's add some calcium. That's a good thing. Let's take orange juice and add calcium to that, and vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Yeah.
So now we've added 5 things. Oh, let's put ascorbic acid in there for good measure. And so we start adding all these different synthetic nutrients that are completely the opposite of what the body needs to run to make energy. Again, it's we are designed. Homeostasis is designed on an engine of energy, and balance is dictated by energy. And if we can't make optimal levels of energy, what happens? Pathogens take over. They say they're opportunistic. As soon as they sense a wavering of the energy production, they're like, whoa, they wake up from their nap and they start to invade our tissue. The part that people don't realize is that copper creates energy. Copper clears exhaust. Copper combats enemies. It's the only element on the planet that can do all three. Iron's not doing that. Zinc is not doing that. None of these other metals that we're talking about do that. And one of the unique, but the axis that I'm sensitive to, and Adam, be curious to see what your thoughts are, but there's a very clear relationship between fat and copper. Again, because you got to have fat in your diet to absorb it, and you got to have copper in order to metabolize it.
When you say fat, you mean animal fat, right?
Animal fat.
Okay.
Absolutely. From animal fat, from animal tissue is the word fat. Okay. But the other axis is iron and sugar. Iron and sugar have a very powerful relationship in the body. So isn't it interesting that they've been pushing iron and sugar and telling us, you really should be eating a low-fat diet, and let's never talk about copper. And so they've hyperpolarized us around iron and sugar, which is I think it's unnatural, as you would certainly agree. But the problem is when Ansel Keys said, let's eat a low-fat diet, we thought he meant cholesterol. Wink, wink. That's what we really thought he was. He was really going after cholesterol. And what took me the longest time to realize was, oh my gosh, any food that has cholesterol has retinol. And then that's what got me into studying what's retinol all about. And it's like it's an oh my God moment when you start to realize its role in not just vision, liver function, controlling inflammation, just all of the hormonal functions of 9 cysts, 11 cysts, 13 cysts, all trans-retinoic. It's like people never hear those terms. They're also preoccupied with vitamin D, and they don't realize that when you take D, you're going to kill the absorption of retinol. And so this whole campaign to get fat out of our diet was to get retinol out of our diet. And why would we do that? Oh, yeah, because then if you don't have any retinol, you can't make copper bioavailable, and then your muscles start to ache, and you've got all sorts of mitochondrial problems, and there's a complete metabolic breakdown. But the average person doesn't know that. The average practitioner doesn't know that. The average nutritional czar doesn't know that. And I think that's the dilemma, is that you're asking a very sincere and important question, Justin. You want to know, how much do we need? I don't think anybody knows, to be honest. And so what we're doing with the RCP is taking a swag at, well, let's start here. And what I think is really striking is the people who do the RCP with some degree of discipline and some degree of belief that they can heal themselves, a lot of them find out they don't need their thyroid medications anymore. And you know what I think the significance of that is? And I've studied the thyroid pretty closely. I think the thyroid is a goofy way of saying copper. I think everything about this thyroid gland is all about regulating copper in our body. And again, in another conversation, we can get into that. But I think the public has been so misled, and as I say, misled and misfed. I think it's tragic. And they don't realize that there is... Most people are familiar with the Bible. Well, it doesn't matter what your religion is, but most people know there's a Bible. And if you've ever read the Bible, there's a lot of darkness to the Bible, but there's a protagonist. And we all know who the protagonist is. Jesus Christ. We know when we read the New Testament, wow, there's a good guy in all of this controversy of the Old Testament. The Bible of allopathic medicine, and I think probably many schools of medicine, but the Bible of allopathic medicine is the Merck Manual. And it's all doom and gloom. And there's no protagonist. Why? Because the word copper is Voldemort in medical school. They never talk about copper. They don't know what it does. What scares me the most about practitioners is they don't understand mineral metabolism, they don't understand oxygen metabolism, and they don't understand energy metabolism. And because they don't understand those three, and they don't understand that they're interrelated, people don't realize that every condition that's listed in the Merck Manual starts with energy deficiency. So I think we're at a crossroads in society, not just what's happening with DC, but I think the food system is so nutritionally bankrupt and corrupt. I don't know where we start over. It's almost like we do need to start over. And I think we're at a very pivotal point for humanity, because what I worry about the most is the world maps of the use of glyphosate worldwide. It's frightening. And I was at a meeting a couple of years ago in Chicago, and Stephanie Seneff leaned over and she said, "Morley, would you like to know why glyphosate is so bad for copper? I thought I'd died and gone to heaven." And so then she proceeded to tell me about glyphosate's ability to chelate copper down to a pH of 1. Well, that means that there's nothing can stop it. And it's being used everywhere. And people don't understand that you can't fix nitrogen in the soil if the ribosomes don't have access to copper. They don't understand that if the copper doesn't get into the root system, it's not going to get into the plant, and it's not going to get into the chicken or the pig or the cow or the whoever. And they don't know that. And they think, well, I'll just run down to GNC and pick up some copper sulfate. Well, you can't absorb copper sulfate. The body doesn't work that way. And so it's one of these really quirky, we can't live without bioavailable copper. But it's a little tricky about how do we get it back into our tissue, because it's really essential that it be in the food that we're eating. And I think Adam would agree that I don't think it is in the food at the level that we need it to be. That's the challenge.
Copper is so important. I wear a copper bracelet. You know how they use it in the oil industry? They're called zincs. They keep the oil rigs, ships from breaking down. They're called zincs, and copper is one of the metals involved. So I wear copper, and definitely that's one way to get copper in one way to do it. Of course, you need it inside too, but outside protects the skin from aging, and it works really well. I've been wearing that one bracelet for about since 1989.
Wow. You might be interested. There's a copper researcher, Lauren Pickert, has a company in Seattle, Washington, and the website is reverseskinaging.com. And he's developed a copper cream and a copper serum that's supposed to be used topically, and it does exactly what you're talking about. It I'll use the word rehydrates, but it recopperizes the tissue, and it's on so many different levels. The copper is essential to rebuild the endothelial layer and the whole communication and all the metabolic processes of the skin. Again, it's the average person doesn't have that awareness, and you alluded to the fact that it's much better to have it inside your body, but it's actually good to have it on the outside too. And what are the products that they're now selling? You can buy copper socks, and you can buy copper braces, and all these different. Well, they've now woven it into sheets for hospitals, and that's all well and good. But if the patients And the individuals had the copper in their tissue and their muscles, as you're so importantly stressing. Well, then you don't need it on a bracelet or an elbow or whatever. And I think that the public needs to be better informed about the roles that copper plays. I just think it's so essential. And I think that what we're bumping up against is still the issue is what's the amount that we need, and is there another source? I'm not sure I'm ready to embrace your idea that the synthetic form of 13-cis-retinoic acid is safe, particularly given the clients that I've worked with who are the sickest over the years have all taken Accutane, and it's a devastating medication. Is there a safer form? I don't know, but I'm certainly going to look into it based on this conversation. But I think that's the absolute, as I understand it, it's the absolute essential component of making these copper pumps work, these copper pumping enzymes work. They must have the retinoic acid. And I think your point's valid. Mother Nature always has a backup plan. Well, bring it on. I don't know what it is. I would love to know what the backup plan is for ATP7A and ATP7B, but in my research, I've not come across anything that suggests that there's any other food component or nutrient that would make it work properly. So,
do we know of any grass-fed farms that also feed the soils like ocean minerals or something? Because grass is able to uptake, I believe, all 92 minerals. I believe it's the only sort of substance that can do that in nature. Uptake all the minerals if they're available. And I know that Joel Salatin calls himself a grass farmer,
Right.
and I wonder if he or other people like him are watering their grasses with something like ocean minerals or something comparable so that we can get all the minerals into the grass, and then the cows will eat that. And then maybe that would produce some sort of butter, cheese, milk, or eggs, or, not eggs, but just everything that would contain that retinoic acid from the cow through that process. I don't know.
It's a great
Fish
question.
are not necessarily vegetarians. They've been fed exclusively on fish. And one of the reasons cows can get rid of that, or get away with that, it's the only animal that I know of that is relatively immune to omega-3 fatty acids. That's why if you feed omega-3s to a pig or chicken, you're going to get loaded with them. But in a cow, you'll find it's really hard for a cow to die of yellow fat disease. It's the hardest of all. Bears will die before, salmon will die before, fish will die before.
Wow.
But cows just have that, some say it's the extra stomachs, who knows what it is. Because grass is very toxic in that it has all those omega-3 fatty acids. But a cow, they can graze on grass forever. It's certainly better than the feed they give them, which often has aflatoxin and everything else. But feed a pig grass or omega-3s or flax or anything like that, and a chicken, it becomes highly counterproductive. Cows, no, feed them all. Cows have actually been fed nothing but fish when they've been raised by the sea, and there was no anything else to feed them. So they just fed them fish. They ate them fine.
So, Adam, with all of your books that you've written on yellow fat disease and omega-3s and this type of PUFAs and things, do we know of any research that shows sort of this idea that we're talking about here, which is lowering your iron so that this oxidation doesn't occur? Do we know of any research that shows like people that do consume, because what you're saying is like alligators and mice and all the animals, they all eventually succumb to yellow fat disease with the oxidation of all these things. Are there people that consume omega-3s and PUFAs that also are working on lowering their iron? And do we know of those people and how they've interacted in your research?
Well, yes. Lipofuscin is basically a pig for iron. It'll get it no matter where you have it. It's going to get it. So best to have as little as possible. You can be anemic, and the lipofuscin is going to find it. And if not, it uses copper, it uses zinc, and it uses manganese. Those are the three other favorite minerals involved in dementias of all kinds, Parkinson's disease, all of them.
So real quick, Adam,
rarely used.
I'm guessing, Morley, when Adam says it uses copper, I'm guessing, Morley, you're thinking it uses copper that's not loaded properly, right? So
Correct.
what people would say is toxic copper because it's not.
And just to put it in order of magnitude, for every
sure.
atom of copper, there's 60 atoms of iron in the body. So people need to understand these are not equal metals in terms of numbers and amounts. It's about 90 milligrams of copper that runs the human, and it's about 5,000 milligrams of iron.
Okay.
It's a big differential.
Favorite. It always has copper in it, though. When you examine it, it has copper, but such a tiny amount. So obviously, if nothing else is available for lipofuscin to do its job, but copper is rarely available. Manganese is, in fact, manganese probably is more available than copper is for lipofuscin. But the to-go metal for lipofuscin is iron because it's easy to get, and obviously the more you have. Now here's another thing about iron. I explained that lipofuscin is involved in 3 of the deadly sins of aging, but iron is involved in all 7. So there's the thing. It doesn't just work through lipofuscin. That's just one avenue it works to. And also the combination that iron goes. I might have told you, Justin, about the case of a man that I was taken to see that was dying, and he was bedridden. He couldn't get out of bed. And he explained to me that he had a black stool and that he was dying because of that. And I said, are you taking a prescription iron, an iron sulfate? Well, I don't know. I'm taking a prescription iron. Well, it's always iron sulfate. So I went in his medicine cabinet. I found it and I said, stop taking this. And he lived.
Wow. Interesting.
I mean, complete survival. And to show you the other case, I'll give you one quick case of the vegetarian vampire. I work managing a health food store in a mall, and I see a guy walking by with a cake. And he looked just like the Tom Cruise character in the Anne Rice movie, you know. So he sees me looking at him. He comes up to me and says, sir, I am not a vampire. I said, well, I figured that. But it's interesting that you have an iron overload. You'll see a grayish bronze complexion in a person.
Right.
He says, well, that can't be, sir, because I am a vegetarian. I said, well, vegetarians can get iron overload too. He said, how? Well, what food? For instance, olives. Oh, my God, I eat 2 cans of black olives a day. And black olives, the ones with ferrous fumarate are the worst, but the other ones are not good for you either.
Wow. So I appreciate your sharing that with the listeners, because some of my sickest clients are vegetarians and vegans. And I've got 25 vegans eating beef liver tablets, desiccated beef liver tablets, because that's how desperate they are to feel better. And I don't think people realize that plants, they take up a lot of minerals. Well, one of them's it's always going to be iron. Is going to be one of the ones they're going to take up. And but what I didn't know is that when I was little, we grew up watching Popeye cartoons. And whenever Popeye needed strength, what did he do? He opened up a can of spinach, right? Mm-hmm. And what did the spinach have? It had iron, right? We're supposed to know that, right? What I came across an article a few weeks ago. It was a study being done in China that involved some German nutrition experts, and they had a low copper diet and a high copper diet. And the low copper diet was rice and milk, and the high copper diet, which blew me away, was spinach, mussels, right? Spinach and pork. And it turns out that the protein that we depend on, that Justin keeps talking about, ceruloplasmin, we have 40 units of 30 units in a healthy body, 30 units of ceruloplasmin in a healthy human per unit of measure. But a healthy pig, has 140 units. And what people need to understand about a pig is they have a job on the farm. They're supposed to eat what everyone else doesn't want to eat. They're the cleanup batter, right? And so they have a lot of histamines to deal with. And what's one of the most important enzymes that is expressed through ceruloplasmin is histaminase. It breaks down histamines. And so therefore, the pig has no issue. Doesn't matter what he's eating, he or she is eating. They've got the histaminase to break it down. But I was absolutely stunned to find out that spinach had copper back in the day, and you go to a nutrient table today, there's no copper. So they've hybridized foods so they don't take up the copper, but they're taking up the iron. And that's the insanity of the food system.
And do you think it's true that there's so much iron being liberated through the, acid rain and things in the soils?
I wasn't sure, but in talking with farmers, they have assured me that is a factor, and it's leading to an increase of iron in the soil. I take them at their word. I haven't studied it. Maybe Adam knows better. I don't know.
Well, it works both ways. If there's calcium in the soil, you get over-alkalinity when the acid rain hits it. But if you don't have calcium in the soil, then you get the other one. So acid rain can make things acid or alkaline depending on what it combines with.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So can you share real quick? Excuse me, Justin. Can you share? You talk about 7 deadly sins of aging. Can you rattle those off real quickly? Is that something
let me try. Regular genetics, the genome, the other genetics, the mitochondria,
right?
Lipofuscin outside the cell, lipofuscin inside the cell. Too little cells. If we wear away, our muscles go away and go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Too many cells. Cancer is a salient example.
Right.
And the final one is called glycation, the age, AGE. Okay. And actually that again is lipofuscin because the oils control it and the sugar has very, very little to do with it.
Right. Even
though you see the caramelization of sugar, right. Things like that. But that's really involved with the oils. In fact, by the way, cholesterol, though it is found in atherosclerosis, the only thing that makes it active is omega-3 fatty acids. You'll find that in mainstream medicine books, but they don't tell you that part. And omega-3 is not omega-6. I have never been able to find a single case of yellow fat disease through omega-6s. That doesn't mean they're good. I keep them at a minimum. In fact, either one, you can't avoid it. There's no way you can avoid omega-3s or omega-6s. They're plant defense chemicals, for one thing.
That's
Plants
true.
don't like us. We're not invited to their parties. They do not want us to eat them. But they have to fight back with chemical warfare. An animal uses its claws or it bites us and runs away. It doesn't need so much chemical warfare. Plants, they're just still. All they can do is kill you with chemicals. And they usually do. Some of the major aging are non-fruit vegetables. Like a tomato is a fruit. So doesn't really want to kill you because it wants the seeds to be distributed. But any other kind of leaf or root, you're in trouble. Particularly the leaves are the most toxic part of a plant. That's the part they don't want you to touch. It's like, here's my tomato. It's like showing their fruit in your hand. And what does the human being do? Eat its hand instead of the fruit. So plants don't like that. And they have killed, because they can upscale that so much, they have killed entire herds of animals, herds of them. They do it on insects, spiders, everything. They're pretty smart. They actually have a thinking brain, as Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose proved back in the late 1800s. And of course, he was rejected by the British scientists at that point. He thought he was crazy, that a plant can think, and that even the element with the most consciousness is tin. Tin has the most consciousness, and it can die. In fact, when George Bernard Shaw was with Bose and he saw a plant screaming on his Bose's meters, he had the most powerful meter at the time. They're just catching up with him. He fainted, the story goes.
Yeah, it's also fascinating. I wish we could really understand the dynamics of the pros and cons, of something like cod liver oil and trying to get that retinoic acid, because on one level you have the pros, which is that retinoic acid allowing copper to be fully bioavailable into ceruloplasmin. But then you have the cons that Adam's talking about, which is the lipofuscinosis and this oxidation. And I just wish there was some way to know. I mean, this is, I guess, the God question, right? I mean, how do we know? I wish there was a way to know the pros versus the cons of taking something like cod liver oil. You know what I mean? I just wish there was way.
I think my approach to it is, and I appreciate the fact that there are the omega-3s and 6s in the cod liver oil. I think there are fewer components of those in the better produced cod liver oils. But I think the rationale is, at least from the standpoint of the RCP, is let's lower the iron footprint and let's increase the footprint of the bioavailable copper for a lot of reasons that we've been discussing. And then we're in a much better position to restrict or mitigate the production of the yellow fat. Now there's no scientists that I know of, or no science that I'm aware of, that says that's exactly what you need to do. It's just what we've learned over the years is that as people adopt these nutritional principles of the RCP, they do make more energy, and they do feel better, and their symptoms do mitigate and begin to subside. And there's changes that take place in their mineral profiles that show up in both hair tests and blood tests. But we're not zeroing in on the omegas. I've never thought that they were that important, and so I've never really worried about them the same way that I think, Adam, you have in the course of your work. And I'm certainly going to dig a little deeper, but at the end of the day, the only way I know to regulate the villain, and I appreciate that you've identified iron as being behind all 7 causes of aging, or the demise of aging, and it is iron. Well, the only element I know that can regulate iron is copper. The only element I know that can regulate oxygen is copper. And so that means we need more bioavailable copper. And if that means we ingest some of these PUFAs, well, that's a risk I'm willing to take in order to create the infrastructure so that the body can produce bioavailable copper. Because I think that at the end of the day, that's what we were designed to do. I think our maker and Mother Nature wanted us to be Kupro beings, not ironic beings. I think there's been a very deliberate attempt to try to turn us into robots, and it's not working as far as I'm concerned.
And Morley, I'm curious, have you worked with people like doing the exact RCP protocol? Maybe people like offline, or people that you kind of didn't put in your public profile, but have you worked with people and replaced the cod liver oil with some of these eggs and butter and cheese and ghee and things? And if you have, I wonder what their levels would show.
I haven't. I think it would be fun. What I would love to, what I'd love to do is I'd love Adam to get the full Monty Iron panel, and let's take a look at his overall profile of, where's his iron, where's his copper, where's his ceruloplasmin, where's his magnesium and RBC, where's his vitamin A and D. I'd love to know, just because of you've had such a precise approach that you've taken with your diet. It would just be interesting to see how it would compare. If you're up for the challenge, I'd love to do that, because I think it's you present one, you represent longevity. I have no idea how old you are, but I think you're a couple years older than I am. But you have vitality, you have sparkle in the eye. You can tell you're but you're a man at peace, which I think is very important, especially at that tender age. And so I think you've accomplished what everyone strives for. I just want to lift the hood and say, what's going on inside? I think it would be fascinating to see.
I was born before the First World War, so I've been around a while.
Okay.
Interesting thing, I would do one of those tests, except I only do a Revisi test, because all medical tests, 99% of them are inaccurate. One thing I do to see where iron is, when people say I'm measuring iron, are they measuring, they do a blood test, right? Are they doing the cell test? Are they doing the plasma test? Are they doing what part of the blood are they? And now some tests claim that the cell is more accurate than the plasma, but you actually need 3 readings because you need a ratio. So you need to know the amount of calcium or potassium, whatever it is, inside the cell, outside the cell, and you need to know the balance between them. The simplest way to do that without doing a biopsy is simply measure the total by miserating it all up and then measuring it, measuring the serum, which is commonly done and easily, and then doing the mathematics and figure what the balance is and where it is. And indeed, for instance, in cancer, a cancer cell has 60% or more potassium in it than outside it. So, and less. Heart problems have the potassium outside and not inside. That ratio is all important. Yeah. So when I knew someone who had cancer and had chose to do the chemotherapy, one time they called up and said, "Oh my God, potassium is so high, you got to get in here right away." I hung up the phone and said, "We're not going in, because now that proves that the potassium is coming out of the cell, and you have changed your metabolism from acidic growth pattern to a alkaline destruction of the cancer cell pattern." And indeed, when they did the x-ray, when they came back, first of all, it normalized by the time we came back after the weekend was over. The cancer had shrunk dramatically. So the ratio is all important.
Absolutely. Yeah, we measure the iron in the hemoglobin, we measure iron in the serum, and then we measure iron in the serum ferritin.
So you can subtract that amount then and get the ratio, which is very important. Yeah.
And what most people don't realize is that serum ferritin, they think it's some measure of iron vitality. When ferritin shows up in the blood, you got a problem on your hands. You got some organ, most likely the liver, that's not metabolizing iron properly, and the iron's being dumped. What surprised me is I would have thought that the iron was being dumped into lipofuscin. It isn't necessarily being dumped there, being dumped somewhere else in the cell. But the ferritin protein is being secreted out, and it's basically empty when it shows up in the blood. And people don't realize that's in fact the case, is that the serum ferritin it's equated with inflammation, as you probably know. And the inflammation is the iron back in the tissue because the body couldn't metabolize it and couldn't recycle it. So
when the blood can't use it, then obviously it's going to other places, which why when you go up into the mountains, you need a little more iron to get that oxygen around. So it's kept out of it's kept from forming into gangs. But when you get down, especially if you're a deep sea diver and you're taking iron, then you're in mortal danger, because none of that iron at 33 feet is being used whatsoever to deliver it. So where is it going? Basically, it's like a crew of workers that has nothing to do. So they start building their own projects when they're not hired, because I got a hammer in my hand, I got some nails, I think I'll go build my own project. And that whole project, their project is often counterproductive to our health.
So when were you born, Adam?
1941.
1941. Okay.
So Morley, I had a question for you in terms of the iron. You said before that when you take those numbers and you do a blood test, and you find out how many milligrams of iron, and as a man, we're supposed to have around 5,000, you mentioned. And when I take the number and multiply it for myself, it's like 16,000 or whatever. So when you do these tests, can you go back and look and watch that number decrease on subsequent tests?
No, I think what you're going to witness is the change in the prevalence of those 9 factors that Adam was talking about.
Okay, so you won't see the iron decrease then.
Yeah, we don't have the testing, and I totally agree with Adam that the accuracy of the testing is very flawed. Mm-hmm. But we don't have the level of detail or the quantification of the mineral profiles or the enzyme profiles or the metabolic pathways. I think people think there's a lot more precision than really is there. At the end of the day, what we're seeking to do is make energy and begin to eradicate aches and pains. Now, I think all too often people have been trained that if they've eliminated aches and pains, then they're getting better. not until you start making more energy, not until you have more vitality, not until you have more ability to do more. That's when I think real health begins to take over. And
that would be really nice to see those iron levels decrease, though. Wouldn't that be great for a test to see the lowering of those numbers?
But where the change really shows up is if people have really high serum ferritin, there'll be a precipitous drop. Or if they have really low ferritin, like below 20, it'll begin to rise and get back into a more normal state. I've seen major changes in serum iron. It should be around 100. And people who have what they think is anemia, down in the 20s and 30s, when it starts to get up in the 90s, they get pretty excited because they realize that their recycling system is working right. And that's what serum iron is really telling us. Hemoglobin, most people tend to have normal hemoglobin. Occasionally it'll be low. Again, it's another marker for so-called anemia. Mm-hmm. But people don't realize that of the 8 enzymes to make heme, you got to have copper in 4 of them. Mm-hmm. And so it's just complete gaps in knowledge and understanding about how the body actually makes this essential component called blood. And I think one of the more fascinating things, and I'm sure Adam's well aware of this, is the bone marrow's got to decide, am I going to make bone or am I going to make blood? That's a pretty important decision. Which way am I going to go?
Yeah.
And I have no idea what determines one way or the other. Adam probably knows, but it's just, to me, it's like, wow, that's a pretty important decision. Are we going to build infrastructure, or are we going to build mobility and being able to support the nutrition of the body? It's a fascinating pivot point for the metabolism each and every day.
Usually the miracle of the body is it can make those decisions for us. But the more we overload it with different chemicals and things, the harder it gets to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting, Morley, with the cod liver oil and things, because given, the lack of copper in people's current diets, and not just that, but the lack of copper that's available through the environment and the earth being, producing less copper, and then the increase in iron and the standard American diet, when you have like people that are iron overloaded with in copper deserts taking fish oils, that's, I think, what you're looking at, Adam. The results in your work is you're seeing the result of that, right? Where people are taking these fish oils and these PUFAs while being overloaded with iron and have no copper in their bodies. And that's the results in all the research you're doing, right, Adam?
Well, I found that no matter what condition you are, if you take fish oils, it's an aging substance. However, since aging, I have not seen anyone other than like Fred Camero made it to 101, Emmanuel Rivisi 101. Some people get on there. Hoffman 103, I believe. Certain people get on there and seem to cheat that. With animals, lipofuscin is always a measurement of aging. So exact they can almost get the day when they measure fish. But most animals are confined to a certain diet. Human beings, we can be a vegan, we can be a keto, we can do just about anything. We can even be like Mr. Eats All and eat Cessna airplanes. There's all kinds of things we can do. So that's where we have the freedom to get past there. But one of the problems, as Morley pointed out, is sometimes there's a nutrients in something that has an omega-3. You cannot possibly avoid omega-3s entirely unless you do like Ray Peat does with his coconut oil, get a totally refined one that has all of that extracted, which is just a little bit much for my taste. I prefer coconut oil, which is really not coconut oil. When you get the pure stuff, it's got all these other elements in it. Mm-hmm. And I find one of the healthiest foods, and I've seen people walk away from cancer, from fatal cancer, by simply taking spirulina. It's loaded with omega-3s, the cold one. But if you take raw spirulina and take it in the late afternoon and the evening, I know a case of a gentleman who was given a few days to live, a week to live, to get his affairs together. I told the mother to take the powdered spirulina that was not heated at all. And within 3 days, his waist shrunk down overnight, 4 inches. But by the time I went back to the doctor, the waist was normal. And what could the doctor say? Spontaneous remission. That's their only cure, right? Other than
That's right.
their cures, spontaneous remission is their only other cure.
Well, gentlemen, I have another commitment that I've got to get to. But
Sure.
before we part company, I want to share something that one of my students put together for me. And this is a model of ceruloplasmin, since we've been talking about it, and it gets even better. The student is her husband's pretty good with obviously pretty good with electricity as well, but he wanted to make sure that.
Oh wow!
That's the magic of ceruloplasmin. Is those little blue balls became electric, and that's the magic of ceruloplasmin. It does the same thing inside our body. So I thought it was very fitting given this, what I think is probably going to be one of my favorite conversations. So Justin, thank you for making it happen. And Adam, I just really admire what the work that you do, but just your staying power to get through yesterday. And just before this connection got made, people will never. That should be your 13th book, how Adam overcame technology. But this has just been a phenomenal exchange, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to have this. And I really hope that we can continue the dialogue going forward.
Oh, I'd love
That'd be
to.
great. Yeah, real quick, Morley, I know you got to run, but just let people know where people can find you. It's rcp123.org. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
now when people see me, I'm going to be reading Adam's books and getting schooled up. But I love your the fact that you think iron is as bad as it is. You're a man after my own heart. And I look forward to the work that we can do together to help people kind of push back the tide of insanity and push back the tide of just too much iron. It's really tragic what's happening. So
definitely. And Adam, real quick, let people know where people can find you and your work as well, because it's seminal.
At solartiming.com is where we have our books. I got about 45, and now I'm doing newsletters too. That my bestseller now is Sex Newsletter and Turd Eyes Newsletter. But our books and everything are available there, and we have a SunSync Nutrition sign up for $99 for various other features I won't go into here. But anyway, solartiming.com is where the books are available and the videos too.
Awesome, guys. And listeners, these two gentlemen are they're on for a reason. And because, like I mentioned before, there's alternative health, and then there's alternative health. You know, there's more to it than what you're being told in the average natural health field. And so this is why we have Adam on and Morley on as well to talk about these topics. So go join solartiming.com, get some of his videos, and SunSync Nutrition, and also Morley Robbins. Join his programs, guys, because these guys are telling you so much information that you're not going to hear in naturopathic schools, doctorate degrees, and all these types of things. This is the cutting edge. So make sure to join Adam over at solartiming.com and rcp123.org. I can't stress that enough. Guys, thank you so much, and let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Both of you.
Yeah.
All right. Love you guys. I'll be in contact via email, and have a great day.
All right.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
All right, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that show, episode 683 with Mr. Adam Bergstrom and Morley Robbins. And I'll put links to their website at extremehealthradio.com/683. So I hope you enjoyed that. And kind of what I was talking about a little bit during that show was, there's alternative health and there's alternative health. And this is what, my friend Matt Blackburn at Mito Life Radio, and, he's got a great podcast. And this is what we were trying to disseminate, this type of information, because in the alternative and natural health world, all you hear is the same kind of stuff, like ketogenic diet, paleo diet, and all these fad sort of diets. And it's all about restriction and these types of things. And, one of the simplest and easiest things to do is to figure out how you're going to be dealing with all of that iron that's stored in your body. And like Morley and Adam were saying,
iron is the enemy number one. And I would also add, non-native EMF to that by far, for sure. Non-native EMF in the form of electromagnetic frequencies coming from dirty electricity in your wall, and Wi-Fi routers and cell phones and smart meters and cell towers and all these types of things that are damaging our cell membranes. And we had Professor Martin Paul on the show talking about that. And, that stuff is really a big problem. And, it's basically what's going on is that we've altered our environment, and so much so to the extent that our DNA and our genes are not expressing the way they should. It's our genes and our genetic expression are doing what they're supposed to be doing, given this unnatural environment that we're living in. So, like Morley was saying during the show, heavy metals are a big problem. And what we really need to be dealing with is this overflow of iron that we have in our body. So I did the calculations. He said men are supposed to have around 5,000 milligrams of iron in their body. And women, I think it's around, 3 or 4,000? Something less. And you do the calculations, and at 45 years old, I've got 16,000 milligrams of iron in my body. And so all of us have that too as a result of the Iron Fortification Project, acid rain liberating excess amounts of iron in our soils and iron in our food. That's that Iron Fortification Project. Most people don't even realize that, but that's where, iron was added, iron filings to our food in 1941, and then they doubled it in 1969. And this is causing that rust that I was talking about earlier. This is what's causing that. And how do we deal with that? What do we do to eliminate excess iron? And the best way to do that is through blood donations. And so this is why the blood donations are a big part of the RCP protocol. So I really like Adam and I really like Morley, on our show. And I think they have some great information. And like I said before, it's a lot of alternative information. And I like what they're doing because they're so go against the grain of what most people are putting out online in the natural health world. And so, if you really want to get healthy, figure out what you're going to do with all this iron. Have a plan put together for what you're going to do with all this excess iron that you have in your body. And, a vegetarian diet is very, very high in iron. And what combines with iron, which is a heavy metal, aluminum, other heavy metals, estrogens, excess estrogen, bad estrogen, xenoestrogens from our environment. What else? Polyunsaturated fatty acids, and so, this is a real issue. So getting to the bottom of this is really huge. And that's why I advocate, lots of good magnesium and really figuring out what you're going to do with all this, environmental toxins in our environment. And so this is really great information, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you liked it, maybe we can do some more. I have a lot of ideas for quote unquote debates where we invite a couple people on the show and talk about certain things. We can debate sugar, we can debate water, we can debate what else? Veganism versus carnivore diet. We can, do all kinds of debates. So, I think that would be a lot of fun to do that. So, wow, what a show. What a show. So the question I have for you is, so far, I haven't been convinced to take the polyunsaturated fatty acid in the form of, what is that called? What was he talking about, Morley? Oh, cod liver oil. Yeah, so I'm not convinced to take that. I feel like you could get enough from butter, from ghee, from egg yolks, from cheese, from milk, from yogurt, these types of things. So I don't know. I'm going to have to look more into that myself. But that's my question for you. Do you feel like you should take something like a cod liver oil in order to get that vitamin A, that retinoic acid, to fully load copper into that ceruloplasmin protein? Because that's really the crux of it, is how do we get that copper that's unbound to be bound to ceruloplasmin and those other enzymes? So That's the crux of this whole thing. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show, and don't forget to support us on our store at biochargeme.com. This is how we stay in business. And I just want to tell you a couple different products that you could look at. One is the castor oil packs that we have on there, and we had Dr. Marisol on the show, a naturopathic doctor, and she's got these great castor oil packs that you can essentially leave on your liver overnight. So what they do is they have these little straps that you can put around your body, and you can go to sleep and do a castor oil pack essentially for 8 hours while you're sleeping. And this is a really great way to detoxify, support your liver's 500 functions, and all of that. And something else I want to let you guys know about too is I really like supporting my friend Matt Blackburn over at Mito Life Radio, and I love his products. And he's got the PUFA Protect product, which is that vitamin E product, which helps with hormone regulation and getting rid of excess polyunsaturated fatty acids from your diet. He's also got Panacea, which is a form of Shilajit, which contains all trace minerals in their biologically active form. I really recommend that product. That is a huge one. And that helps also to chelate polyunsaturated fatty acids from your body, as well as give you all those beautiful minerals that you should be consuming. And then also, he's got Dissolvidol, which is a really great enzyme to take with your food. Dissolvidol is a systemic enzyme. Sorry, that's one you take away from food before you go to bed, and that's what I do. I take it at night before I go to bed, and then in the morning before I eat any food, and that helps as sort of like a Pac-Man to eat up fibrosis and scar tissue inside your body. So that's a great product. And then his product Digestidol is a great enzyme to take as well. So go check out those products from Mito Life over at biochargeme.com, along with the other two products I talked about before, which is the AquaCure and the Relax Far Infrared Sauna. And as far as the Mito Life products, I think the code EHR15 will give you a 15% discount. So we got all kinds of cool stuff on there as well, like from light therapy devices to the Magnetico sleep pad to the glasses. You can protect your eyes from blue light, which is what I wear every single night. So a lot of cool stuff over there that you can check out, and I really encourage you guys to do that, and that helps support the show. But also, you guys get some really cool products too, and that's the awesome thing about that. So hope you enjoyed that show. If you did, please pass it on to your friends. I would greatly appreciate that. Anybody that you know on social media, like on Instagram or Facebook, please share it with your friends. I would really appreciate that. And again, if you guys want to grab the show links for this show and to check out Morley Robbins' website or Adam Bergstrom's website, or the AquaCure, the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, the castor oil packs, or the Mito Life products, just go to extremehealthradio.com/683. And next week, who do we have? We have someone coming up really cool. I think it's Peggy Hall. Is it Peggy Hall? Friday, January 22nd. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Yeah. Peggy Hall, Health Freedom, thehealthyamerican.org. She's an awesome, awesome person. So hopefully we don't get kicked off of YouTube for having her on, but oh well, I don't care. We got to get the truth out, right? Got to get the word out. All right. Love you guys. Thank you again for checking out this show, episode 683. Appreciate it a lot. And thank you again for your support. And if you guys want to go further with your health, come and join our Extreme Health Academy. Every Friday morning, we do live Zoom calls, and we get to chit chat and share ideas and brainstorm and support each other and inspire each other. We have courses every single month, live workshops every single month. So many cool things coming down the pipe. We actually have Morley Robbins' Root Cause Protocol coming up at the end of this month in January of 2021, coming up for the workshops inside the Extreme Health Academy. So if you guys are looking for a supportive community, a place to be inspired, a place to make friends, a place to get support, a place to get cutting edge ideas about your health, and a place where you can feel like you're meeting your tribe, come and join us. There's a free 14-day trial, so you can check it out. And if you like it, come and stay. If you don't, that's cool too. But I'm in the forums every single day, helping and supporting as much as I can. I've got a thriving community in there, tons of great content as well. So just go to extremehealthacademy.com and enter the code EHR14 to come and join us. We'd love to see you in there. And if you do, tag me in the forums, and I'd love to say hello and support you in any way I possibly can. So, all right, love you guys. Thanks for listening to episode 683.